Who let them cry like that? The voice thundered through the marble corridors like a whip cracking in a church. It wasn't just loud, it was sharp, commanding, the kind of tone that froze people mid-step. Even the chandeliers seemed to tremble above the Whitmore penthouse that morning. Charles Whitmore stood at the base of the staircase, his tailored suit immaculate, his jaw locked tight. The noise upstairs, 3 distinct cries rising and falling out of sync, was like an alarm bell ringing in his chest. For 5 years, he had learned to live with that sound. But today, something in it felt different, more desperate, more human. "Mr. Whitmore, sir, please," stammered one of the housemaids, clutching her apron. "The twins are upset again. The therapist said not to." "Not to what?" His tone sliced through her words. "Let them scream themselves to death?" He turned toward the staircase, but another voice stopped him. "Sir, please," said Mrs. Grant, the housekeeper, moving quickly between him and the steps. Her voice carried decades of calm authority. "You know what the doctors said. Sudden changes can worsen their condition." Charles's nostrils flared. "Condition," he repeated coldly, as if the word itself insulted him. "They're my daughters, not a diagnosis." And then, without another word, he stormed up the stairs. Meanwhile, in the east wing of the penthouse, a young woman froze mid-swipe of her cleaning cloth. Maya Williams had been in the house less than 2 hours. The agency told her it was a routine cleaning shift for a quiet client. Nothing about marble floors, antique vases, or floor-to-ceiling windows had prepared her for that cry. The sound came again, thin, piercing, like glass cracking in her chest. She put down her cleaning bucket, listening. The sobs weren't steady. They rose in waves, overlapping 3 voices of children, each trapped in their own rhythm of panic. She had heard cries like that once before, in Charleston, when her little brother had his first sensory meltdown at 7 years old. It was the sound of fear, not defiance, the kind that begged the world to slow down. Maya looked up at the spiral staircase leading to the upper level. "Ma'am?" she whispered to Mrs. Grant, who appeared in the hallway, face pale. "Shouldn't someone go check?" "Don't," Mrs. Grant said firmly. "You're just here for cleaning. Mr. Whitmore doesn't allow the staff near the nursery." "But—" Maya's voice faltered. Another scream pierced the air, sharper this time, ending in a choked sob. Something inside her, an instinct older than rules, moved her feet forward. "Wait," Mrs. Grant called, but Maya was already on the stairs. The second floor opened into a long, quiet corridor lined with framed photographs, images of a man, a woman, and 3 newborns in hospital blankets. The woman's eyes, soft and bright, caught Maya's attention for a fleeting second before another cry tore through the silence. She followed the sound to a white double door slightly ajar. The crying came from inside. She pushed it open. The room was beautiful but chaotic: shelves of stuffed animals, spilled toys, a toppled chair. 3 little girls were huddled in separate corners, red-faced, trembling. 2 had identical curls and wide brown eyes clouded by distress. The third, slightly smaller, was covering her ears and rocking back and forth, her tiny body shaking. Hey, it's okay," Maya whispered, stepping carefully inside. Her voice was soft, untrained, but warm. "You're safe. Nobody's mad, sweetheart." One of the twins glanced up at her just a flicker and whimpered harder. Maya's chest ached. "It's okay," she repeated, her voice breaking into a rhythm. Hush now, little one." The melody rose, faint at first, then fuller. It was an old lullaby her grandmother used to hum while washing dishes in Charleston's humid evenings. Slow, gentle, the kind that carried comfort even when words failed. The room seemed to still. The smallest girl's rocking slowed. One of the twins stopped crying altogether and watched Maya with wide, glassy eyes. The third crawled forward just a few hesitant inches and pressed her cheek against Maya's knee. Maya froze, afraid to move. "That's right, baby," she whispered. "You're safe." Behind her, a floorboard creaked. She turned and gasped. Charles Whitmore stood at the doorway. His tall frame filled the space, one hand still on the doorknob, eyes fixed on the scene before him. He didn't speak for several seconds. The cold mask he wore in boardrooms, the precision-cut arrogance it cracked, his lips parted slightly, and for once, he looked like a man completely lost. The youngest girl lifted her head and murmured something incomprehensible. Charles stepped forward slowly, as though afraid the moment would shatter. How did you do that?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. Maya swallowed. "I just sang. They never—" He stopped himself, looking at the twins now curled up against Maya's arms. "They never let anyone touch them. Children feel things we don't," Maya said softly. "They know when someone's scared of them. Maybe they just needed to feel someone wasn't." For a long moment, Charles said nothing. He stared at the young woman kneeling on the nursery floor, her plain uniform, her trembling hands, the calmness that didn't belong in this sterile world of wealth and control. Then he said quietly, "What's your name?" "Maya Williams, sir." "How long have you been with the agency?" "Just started last week." He nodded slowly, still staring at the children. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was alive, breathing with something new. "I'll need you to stay," he said finally. Maya blinked. "Sir?" "As their caregiver. Whatever they need, you'll handle it. I'll triple whatever you make." She shook her head, startled. "Sir, I'm not qualified for that. I'm just a cleaner." "You're the first person to make them stop crying in 5 years, he replied flatly. "That qualifies you." "It's not that simple," Maya said, standing carefully so she wouldn't disturb the sleeping child leaning against her. "These kids need time, not more staff." "You think I haven't tried?" His voice cracked, barely audible but sharp enough to sting. "Dozens of therapists, specialists, programs. Nothing works." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw not a billionaire but a man holding himself together with pride and guilt. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "it's not about fixing them. It's about listening." Charles's gaze hardened, as if the idea insulted him. Yet he didn't argue. Instead, he turned and walked out, his steps echoing down the marble hall. "Mrs. Grant appeared moments later, whispering, 'You'd better leave before he changes his mind.'" Maya nodded slowly, but her eyes lingered on the sleeping girls. Something in her chest tugged a feeling she hadn't known since her brother's hospital days. As she walked out, she heard a faint sound behind her. One of the girls whispering something like, "Mama." It was probably nothing, just a breath, a reflex. But it followed Maya all the way down the hallway, through the glittering emptiness of the Whitmore mansion, and out into the sharp Manhattan air. And for the first time in a long while, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe she was supposed to come here not to clean, but to stay. The next morning, Maya told herself she wouldn't return. She'd cleaned plenty of strange houses before, but none haunted her like this one. She could still hear the echo of the crying, still feel the weight of those small hands clinging to her. As the subway rumbled beneath Manhattan, she tried to focus on the day ahead. Yet every time she blinked, she saw those 3 girls' eyes wide, lost in a world too loud for them. By noon, her phone buzzed. "Whitmore Estate," the message read. "Please return. Urgent." She hesitated. Maybe she'd forgotten something. Maybe she was being scolded for stepping out of line. Still, curiosity or something deeper pulled her back. When the elevator doors opened onto the marble lobby, Mrs. Grant was waiting, hands folded neatly. "He's expecting you," she said, her voice low. Maya frowned. "Expecting me? I already finished my shift." "Not anymore." "Mrs. Grant's tone softened. "He's upstairs." Maya's heartbeat stumbled. The house was quieter than before, but the silence no longer felt cold, it felt waiting. She followed Mrs. Grant up the staircase, past the photographs of a smiling woman holding 3 newborns. The woman's name, she later learned, was Emma Whitmore, the late Mrs. Whitmore. Charles stood by the nursery door when Maya arrived. He was in a gray sweater now, sleeves rolled, a man caught between exhaustion and pride. "You came," he said simply. "I didn't think I had a choice." She replied, "Your text sounded like an order, then take it as one." His tone was dry, but there was no arrogance in it, just the brittle edge of someone who hadn't slept. He gestured toward the playroom. "They've been asking for you." Maya blinked. "Asking? Not with words," he said. "But every time someone else goes near them, they start crying again." He paused. "You walked out yesterday, and they didn't sleep." Maya stepped closer to the door. Inside, the room was dimly lit by the winter Sunday. One of the twins sat on the rug, humming to herself. Another rocked beside a stack of picture books. The smallest child sat near the window, tracing her finger along the glass. They looked up when Maya entered, faces flickering with recognition. The youngest girl reached her hands out immediately. Maya's breath caught. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling down. "You remember me?" The child pressed her forehead against Maya's shoulder. Maya felt it again, that quiet connection that bypassed words and rules. "You see?" Charles said behind her, his voice low. "That's why I want you here." Maya turned to him. "You don't need a maid, Mr. Whitmore. You need to be with them." "I'm not good at that," he admitted, crossing his arms. "I can build companies. I can negotiate billion-dollar contracts. But I can't even hold my own kids without breaking them." "You're not broken," Maya said gently. "You're scared." His eyes lifted, startled. She didn't flinch. "It's not their fault or yours. Fear's just the sound grief makes when it doesn't know where to go." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Charles said, almost to himself, "You talk like my wife used to." Maya hesitated, unsure if that was an insult or something sacred. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Stay for 1 week. Help them adjust. I'll pay whatever you ask. It's not about money," she murmured. "Then do it for them." His eyes softened, just a little. "Please." That word "please" did not fit easily in his mouth. Maya felt something shift in her. "1 week," she said finally. "That's all. Mrs. Grant appeared later with a modest room prepared for her at the far end of the hall. Maya unpacked quietly a few shirts, her grandmother's photo, and the broken silver necklace she always wore tucked inside her Bible. Outside her window, Manhattan glowed like a restless heartbeat. That night, the house fell into its usual uneasy quiet. Around 9, Charles came by to check on the girls. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the rug, reading softly from a children's book. 3 small heads leaned against her shoulders, half asleep. "They never let anyone touch them," he said quietly. "Not even the therapists." "Because therapists talk," she replied without looking up. "I listen." He smiled faintly, almost involuntarily. "Is that what you did before cleaning?" "I studied special education," Maya said, closing the book. "Didn't finish. Life got in the way." "What kind of life?" "The kind that makes you choose between rent and school," she said simply. He nodded. No pity. No lecture. Just understanding. A rare silence hung between them, gentle, not awkward. "You should rest," he said after a while. "I'll have Mrs. Grant handle your meals." "No need. I cook for myself." "You'll eat with us," he said firmly, then caught himself. "If you'd like, I'll think about it." Her lips curved, just enough to make him blink. The next morning, breakfast in the Whitmore household looked like a photograph: silver cutlery, crystal glasses, untouched food. Maya stood by the doorway, uncertain. Charles was at the head of the table, reading emails. The girls sat quietly, pushing pancakes around their plates. Maya cleared her throat. "Mind if I join?" He looked up, surprised. "Please." She sat between the twins, slicing their pancakes into small squares. "You know," she said softly, "pancakes taste better when they smile." The girls stared, confused. She placed 2 blueberries for eyes, a strawberry for a mouth. One of the twins giggled a sound so small it made Mrs. Grant's eyes well up. Charles watched, speechless, as his daughters began eating. He couldn't remember the last time breakfast had sounded like laughter. Afterward, he found Maya in the kitchen rinsing dishes. "What's your trick?" he asked. "No trick, just strawberries and patience." He leaned against the counter. You make it sound easy. It isn't. But you don't need to be perfect, Mr. Whitmore. Just present. I don't know how to do that, he said quietly. Then start by sitting with them. Even silence teaches. Her words lingered as he walked away. That afternoon, while the children napped, Charles stood outside the nursery door, listening. Maya hummed softly as she tidied up, her voice weaving through the room like sunlight. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a tomb. Later, when the sky turned amber, Maya stepped out to the terrace for air. The city sprawled beneath her, alive and endless. Charles joined her there unexpectedly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Mrs. Grant says you don't drink coffee, he said. I do when it's free. He chuckled quietly and handed her one. For a while, they just stood there, 2 strangers sharing silence. Then Charles said, Do you ever miss home? Maya looked at the skyline. Every day, but sometimes missing something is proof it mattered. He nodded slowly. I know what you mean. The evening wind brushed against them, carrying the faint sound of children laughing from inside. Maya smiled faintly. They're healing, she said. So are you, he replied. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the fatigue behind the confidence, the loneliness behind the wealth. The moment held, delicate as glass. Then one of the twins screamed from inside, breaking it. Maya set down her coffee and ran. Charles followed. The child was sitting up in bed, trembling from a nightmare. Maya sat beside her, humming that same song from the day before. The crying softened, the shaking stopped. Charles watched from the doorway again just as before, but this time, he didn't look lost. He looked grateful. Later, when the house finally quieted, he found Maya in the hallway. Thank you, he said. For what? For reminding me my house isn't cursed, just lonely. Maya smiled softly. Loneliness is easy to fix, she said. You just have to open a door. And for the first time in 5 years, Charles Whitmore did. If you felt touched by this story, don't forget to like this video to share the warmth. Comment where you're watching from, because someone nearby might be feeling the same way right now. Snow had begun to fall over Manhattan the next morning, soft and soundless, turning the city into a pale dream. From the tall windows of the Whitmore penthouse, the flakes looked like drifting ash, dissolving before they ever touched the ground. Maya stood by the glass, a cup of cocoa warming her hands. Her reflection ghosted over the skyline. Behind her, the faint murmur of children's laughter floated through the halls. It was a fragile sound, like glass chimes in the wind. But it was there, and that alone felt miraculous. Charles appeared at the doorway, his tie still loose, his sleeves rolled as if he'd been trying to remember what normal looked like. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep, Maya replied. The snow was calling. He smiled faintly. I used to love mornings like this. Emma would make pancakes shaped like snowmen. The kitchen would be a mess for days. His voice faltered at his wife's name. Maya turned toward him. Your daughters will love that story. You should tell them. Maybe one day, he said softly, and left before the silence could swallow him whole. By breakfast, the house smelled like coffee and butter. The girls sat at the table, restless but curious. Maya flipped the first pancake onto their plates, a snowman with blueberry eyes. The twins giggled. The youngest clapped, whispering something that almost sounded like pretty. Charles lingered in the doorway again, watching them as if afraid the image might vanish if he blinked. See, Maya said, catching his gaze. It's not that hard to bring her memory back. It feels like betrayal, he murmured. No, she said, turning the next pancake. It's how love survives. The words hung in the air, gentle but sharp enough to stay with him. Later that morning, Maya took the girls downstairs to the music room, a cavernous space filled with untouched instruments. Dust lay thick over the grand piano. Your mom must have loved music, she said. One of the twins nodded. The smallest girl pressed a single key. The sound rang out, bright and lonely. Go ahead, Maya urged. Let's wake this place up. Together, They began tapping random notes. It wasn't melody, but it was life. By the time Charles walked in, the room was alive with laughter and music, if chaos could be called that. "I didn't even know that piano still worked," he said, smiling in disbelief. Maya shrugged. "It just needed to be played." He looked around at the scene, his daughters spinning in circles, Maya laughing with her head tilted back and something inside him twisted. It wasn't longing exactly. It was recognition. He'd missed this sound for too long. That evening, the city lost power. A winter storm rolled across New York, swallowing the skyline in darkness. The penthouse flickered once, twice, then went black. Mrs. Grant gasped softly. "Generators down. It might take hours." Maya lit a candle from the kitchen counter, her hands steady. "It's all right," she said calmly. "They just need light." Upstairs, the girls were already starting to panic, their cries sharp in the darkness. Charles followed Maya to the nursery, his phone flashlight casting shaky beams on the walls. "They hate the dark," he whispered. "Then we'll make the dark a friend," she said, kneeling beside the children. "Look," she whispered to them, lifting the candle's flame. "See this little fire? It's brave. It's small, but it never runs away." The youngest girl blinked, staring at the flame. Maya began to hum. The melody was low and smooth, familiar. The twins leaned closer. One of them touched the wax jar. Charles stood still, breath caught, as the room filled with that soft tune. He whispered, "You always do that." "Do what?" she asked. "Turn chaos into peace," Maya smiled faintly. "Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's what you find inside it." They stayed there until the storm passed. Charles watched her, the candlelight painting her face in gold. He noticed the way her eyes softened when the girls fell asleep, the way her fingers brushed hair from their foreheads as if the act itself were sacred. When the lights came back, the room seemed duller somehow, the electric glow less kind than the flame. "You should rest," she said, standing. "You've been up all day." "So have you," he replied. "But I'm used to it." He hesitated, then added, "Emma used to hum that same melody." Maya turned, surprised. "Maybe that's why they trusted it," she said quietly. "They must have remembered." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Maya said softly, "Grief doesn't always mean letting go. Sometimes it's how love learns to breathe again." Charles exhaled, the air leaving him like confession. "You talk like you've lived 100 years. Pain ages you fast," she said simply. Later, in the kitchen, Mrs. Grant poured tea for Maya. "You're doing something I never thought possible," she said. "You're bringing this house back to life." Maya smiled. "I'm not doing anything special. Children just need to feel safe." "And what about their father?" Mrs. Grant asked, knowingly. Maya hesitated. "He's trying," she said finally. "He just doesn't know how to forgive himself. Maybe he needs someone to remind him he still can." Maya looked down at her tea. The reflection of the candlelight from earlier shimmered there. "Maybe," she murmured. The next morning, Charles surprised everyone. He joined breakfast without his phone, sitting beside his daughters as they drew on paper placemats. "What are you making?" he asked. "A house," one of the twins said. "But it's broken," Charles frowned. "Then let's fix it," he said, taking a crayon. He drew a roof over their sketch. The girls laughed. Maya stood by the counter, watching quietly, pride warming her chest. After breakfast, she found Charles in his office. The view behind him stretched across Central Park, white and endless. "You're good with them," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "They trust you. They'll trust you too," she said. "You just have to let them see you fail sometimes." "That's not exactly in my skill set," he said dryly. "It's in every parent's," she replied. He closed his laptop, studying her. "You're not afraid to talk back." "I'm not afraid to be honest. Honesty gets people fired here." "Then I'll clean somewhere else," she said with a grin. He laughed quietly, genuinely, the sound startling both of them. That night, when the city lights glowed again, Charles stood outside the nursery door. Maya sat in the rocking chair, humming softly while the girl slept. He leaned against the frame, hands in his pockets, and whispered more to himself than to her. I forgot what peace sounds like. Maya opened her eyes but didn't turn around. It sounds different in every home, she said. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Sometimes it sounds like forgiveness. He wanted to ask her what hers sounded like, but the words caught in his throat. As he walked away, he glanced back one last time. The candle from last night still sat by the window, its wick burnt low but still faintly glowing. He smiled, realizing that maybe peace didn't have to last forever to matter. Sometimes, it just had to return once to remind you it was real. The following weekend, sunlight poured into the Whitmore penthouse for the first time in what felt like years. The curtains had been opened wide, the air fresh with the faint scent of lavender and toast. Maya stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she whisked eggs in a glass bowl. Behind her, the twins were seated on the counter, their little legs swinging. The youngest, Lila, stood on a stool, carefully dropping slices of bread into the toaster like it was a royal duty. Charles entered, still in his robe, his hair tousled. He stopped mid-step, watching the scene. I thought I heard music, he said. It's just breakfast, Maya replied, smiling. Breakfast, he repeated, as if rediscovering the word. Usually it's just silence and cold cereal. Then we're starting new traditions, she said. Starting? He teased. Sounds permanent. Only if you're brave enough to keep it going. She handed him a plate, and he sat at the counter beside his daughters. For a while, there was nothing but the sound of forks clinking and quiet laughter. It was the kind of peace that sneaks up slowly, as if afraid to be noticed. After breakfast, Charles followed Maya to the laundry room. You know, he said, leaning on the doorframe, this place used to feel like a museum. Now it feels like home. Maya smiled faintly. Children do that. They turn walls into warmth. And what about you? He asked. What do you turn things into? Hope, she said softly. Or at least, I try. He studied her for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly, not in judgment, but curiosity. You really believe that? If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. The day unfolded with a rhythm that felt almost ordinary. The girls built blanket forts in the living room while Maya folded laundry nearby. Charles worked from his home office but kept the door open, a small act, yet monumental for him. Around midday, Mrs. Grant knocked gently on Maya's door. There's someone downstairs asking for you, she said, tone uneasy. Maya frowned. For me? A man. Says he's your brother. Maya froze. Her pulse quickened. My brother's not supposed to know where I work. Should I send him away? Mrs. Grant asked. No, Maya said after a moment. It's okay. I'll go. She found him in the foyer, Marcus Williams. Tall, lean, wearing a worn army jacket. His eyes were tired, his smile tentative. You look good, sis, he said. I didn't think you'd recognize me. Marcus, she whispered, what are you doing here? I tried calling, he said. Didn't get through. I needed to see you. She glanced around nervously. This isn't a good time. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You disappeared. Maya sighed. I'm working. That's all. At a billionaire's mansion? He scoffed. You always did find trouble where it's rich. Don't start, she said quietly. This job matters. To who? Him? He nodded toward the staircase where Charles now stood, observing the exchange from above. The air thickened. Charles descended slowly. Is there a problem here? He asked. Marcus straightened. No problem, sir. Just checking on my sister. She's safe here, Charles said firmly. You don't have to worry. That's the thing about rich folks, Marcus said with a smirk. You always think money makes people safe. Marcus, Maya warned, her voice sharp now. Enough. He held up his hands. Fine. Just don't forget who you are, okay? He turned and left before she could reply. The front door clicked shut, leaving silence in his wake. Maya exhaled slowly, eyes lowered. Charles said quietly, "He's your brother." "He's protective," she said. "We grew up with nothing. He thinks the world only takes. And you think it can give?" "Sometimes," she said, "if you meet the right people." He nodded, but his expression stayed unreadable. The rest of the day passed under a strange cloud. Maya worked quietly, her mind drifting back to Marcus's words. That night, she stepped out onto the terrace again. The city glittered below, endless and indifferent. Behind her, the sliding door opened softly. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Charles said, stepping beside her. "You sound like my brother." "Maybe he's right to worry." "Maybe," she said, "but you can't heal in fear." He studied her profile, the way the city light traced her skin. "You talk like someone twice your age." "Pain does that," she murmured. "You said that before." "Because it's true." A pause hung between them, gentle but charged. Then he asked, "What happened to you, Maya?" She didn't answer immediately. "My mother died when I was 14. Marcus joined the military. I stayed behind to take care of my little brother. He was autistic. Like my girls," Charles said softly. "Yes," she said. "He taught me patience, taught me that love doesn't always speak in words, but when he passed, I stopped listening for a while." "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to be. Grief doesn't ask for pity." She looked at him then, her eyes deep and steady. "It asks for understanding." For a long moment, they just stood there, breathing in the city air. Then a faint sound reached them, laughter. Faint, but real. The girls were awake, playing with flashlights under their blankets again. Charles smiled. "She would have loved this," he said. "Emma, she probably does," Maya said. "Somewhere." He turned to her. "You really believe that?" "I have to," she smiled softly. "Or else the pain wins." He nodded, his throat tightening. "You've changed this house, Maya." "No," she said. "Your daughters did. I just reminded them how." He looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable, part awe, part fear. Then he said quietly, "You've reminded me too." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Charles found himself standing outside Maya's room. He didn't knock. He just listened, heard the faint scratch of her pen on paper, the soft murmur of her prayers. He turned away, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope, fragile and unfamiliar, but alive. Inside, Maya closed her journal and whispered into the quiet, "Please, God, let them keep healing. Even if I'm not meant to stay." She blew out the candle and watched the smoke curl upward like a ghost of light. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock chimed midnight. And for the first time, the Whitmore mansion didn't echo back emptiness, it echoed warmth, the kind that only comes when broken hearts begin to mend. 2 weeks passed, and the Whitmore house had changed in ways no one could quite explain. The air was warmer. The walls didn't seem to echo anymore. Even Mrs. Grant had started humming while setting the table, as if the rhythm of Maya's presence had quietly seeped into everyone's bones. Yet for Maya, the peace she had helped create came with a quiet ache she couldn't name. Every morning she woke to laughter, but every night, when the lights dimmed, she reminded herself this wasn't her home. She was just passing through. On a cold Thursday morning, the first real snowstorm of February rolled in. By noon, the streets below were buried in white, and the city looked like a painting. Inside the mansion, the twins had turned the living room into a snow fort of blankets, while Lila insisted on wearing mittens indoors to practice for the snow. Charles was at the dining table, reading a file but not really seeing it. He kept glancing toward the sound of Maya's voice drifting from the kitchen. "Mrs. Grant," he called. "Has Maya eaten?" "I believe she's helping the girls with lunch, sir," Mrs. Grant said. "You could join them." He smiled faintly. "That's a dangerous suggestion, Mrs. Grant." "So is solitude," she said, walking away. He found them in the kitchen, a chaos of giggles, flour, and spilled sugar. Maya was bent over the counter, showing the girls how to cut cookie dough into heart shapes. "You're supposed to eat them, not decorate the floor with them," she laughed. "We're making daddy cookies," one twin shouted. "Daddy cookies?" Charles repeated, stepping inside. Lila ran up, waving a heart-shaped cookie cutter. "For you, Daddy." His heart stuttered. It was the first time she had said that word in almost 2 years. Maya froze, eyes glancing toward him. He crouched down, his voice trembling. "Say it again, sweetheart." Lila smiled shyly. "Daddy." The word was small, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night he had spent blaming himself. His throat tightened as he pulled her into his arms. Maya looked away, her chest tightening too, but for a different reason. Later that evening, as the snow piled high against the windows, Charles found Maya sitting alone by the fireplace. She was staring into the flames, lost in thought. "You did that," he said quietly. "What?" "You brought my daughter's voice back." "No," she said softly. "She was ready. I just listened when the world didn't." He sat down across from her, the firelight flickering between them. "I don't know how to thank you." "Then don't," she said. "Just be there for them. That's thanks enough." He leaned back, studying her face, the calm strength behind her eyes, the kindness that seemed effortless. "You're different from anyone I've met." "Different can be dangerous," she replied with a faint smile. "Not always," he said. "Sometimes it's exactly what we need." For a long moment, silence filled the room, not awkward but charged with something unspoken. The fire cracked softly, casting gold against the walls. Then Mrs. Grant entered, breaking the spell. "Mr. Whitmore, your meeting is waiting on the line." He hesitated, glancing back at Maya. "I'll be right there." When he was gone, Mrs. Grant lingered by the door. "You know he's changing, don't you?" she said gently. "You've done that." "I didn't change him," Maya murmured. "He just remembered he had a heart." The next day, the snowstorm worsened. The city was practically shut down, and even the Whitmore staff couldn't leave. By nightfall, the generator failed again, plunging the mansion into darkness. Maya gathered the girls in the living room, wrapping them in blankets while lighting candles one by one. Charles joined them, a flashlight in hand. "Looks like it's just us tonight," he said. "I think we can manage," Maya replied, smiling. "Right, girls?" The twins nodded eagerly. "Let's tell stories," Leela said. "Good idea," Maya agreed. "Your dad can start." Charles blinked. "Me?" "Yes. You?" Maya said. "Every dad has at least one story worth telling." He laughed softly. "I doubt mine's interesting." "Try us," she teased. He took a breath. "All right. Once upon a time, there was a man who built towers so tall he couldn't see the ground anymore. He thought height meant success, but one day, he looked down and realized the people he loved were gone." Maya's gaze softened. "What did he do then?" "He climbed down," Charles said. "But the world looked different, smaller, quieter. He didn't know how to start again." "So what happened?" Lila whispered. He looked at Maya. Someone showed him how. Maya's lips parted, but she didn't speak. The fire crackled, the only sound between them. When the lights finally flickered back on, the girls were asleep, bundled together on the couch. Charles lifted one into his arms while Maya tucked in the others. Their fingers brushed briefly, warm, steady, hesitant. "Good night," she said softly. "Good night, Maya," he replied, his voice lower than usual. Hours later, long after the house had gone quiet, Maya sat at her desk, writing a letter she'd never send. "Dear Marcus," she wrote, "you were right about one thing. Rich houses do take something from you. But sometimes, they give something too, a reason to keep believing in people." She paused, then added, "The children are healing, so is he. And maybe, in helping them, I'm healing too." She folded the letter, slipped it between the pages of her Bible, and blew out the candle. But that night, As she drifted toward sleep, she heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hall. A gentle knock followed. "Maya?" It was Charles's voice, soft but uncertain. "Yes," she said, opening the door slightly. He stood there, his expression unreadable. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." She smiled faintly. "You already did." "No," he said. "Not like this." His voice wavered. "You've given me back my family." "They were never gone," she said. "You just stopped seeing them." He exhaled, looking down, then back up at her. "You're remarkable, Maya." "I'm just a maid," she replied quietly. "Not to them," he said, "and not to me." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the world seemed to still the storm outside, the ticking clock, the hum of the city beyond. Then Maya took a small step back. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore." He hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Maya." When he left, she closed the door and pressed her back against it, her heart pounding. She knew lines like this were meant to stay uncrossed, but as snow fell softly outside, she couldn't help but wonder if fate had already decided otherwise. By Monday morning, the snow had begun to melt, leaving the city glistening under a thin veil of silver light. The Whitmore penthouse, once cold and echoing, now pulsed with quiet life. Maya woke early, her routine unshaken coffee first, then breakfast for the girls. Yet that morning, something in the air felt different. A stillness, almost like waiting. She brushed it off as winter fatigue, but deep down, she knew change was coming. By 8, the house was already busy. Charles was dressed for work, his suit crisp, his voice calm as he made a call in the foyer. The girls were at the table, stacking waffles like building blocks. "Slow down or they'll topple," Maya said gently, smiling. "It's a castle," one of the twins declared proudly. Charles looked over, his expression softening as he watched his daughters laugh. "They've built more in a week than I did in years," he murmured. Maya tilted her head. "Sometimes love is the only foundation that holds." He met her eyes, something unspoken flickering between them. Before either could speak, the elevator chimed. Mrs. Grant appeared from the hall, her expression tight. "Sir, there's a visitor, from Child Services." The air dropped several degrees. Charles straightened, his voice low. "Send them in." A woman stepped out, a poised, pale figure in a gray coat, her ID badge glinting under the light. "Mr. Whitmore," she greeted. "I'm Rachel Levine, Family Welfare Division. We received an anonymous report concerning the care of your children." Charles blinked, stunned. "A report? About what?" Rachel flipped through her folder. It was stated that an unlicensed caretaker, possibly without a background check, has been left unsupervised with the children. "Is that true?" Maya froze, the spatula slipping from her hand. Charles turned sharply toward her. "That's ridiculous," he said. "She's not. She's their caretaker." "Yes, but she's under my employment." "Mr. Whitmore," Rachel interrupted, "our concern isn't your employment standards. It's about the safety of minors. We'll need to verify her credentials." Maya's throat went dry. "I don't have papers," she said quietly. "I never finished my certification." Rachel's brows lifted. "Then we'll need to remove you from the premises until an investigation is complete." "What?" Charles snapped. "You can't just—" "Sir," Rachel said firmly, "the law is clear. The children must not be left in the care of an unregistered individual. You can appeal this, but for now—" "She's done nothing wrong," he thundered. The twins had gone silent, their small faces pale with confusion. Lila clutched Maya's apron. "Don't go," she whispered. Maya knelt, trying to smile through the ache in her chest. "It's okay, baby. I'll just be gone a little while." "No," the child cried, her voice sharp with panic. One of the twins began to wail. Charles turned to Rachel, voice trembling with anger. "Do you hear them? She's the first person they've trusted in years. You take her away, and you'll break them again." Rachel hesitated, then sighed. "I'm sorry, sir. It's procedure." Maya stood, her hands shaking. "It's all right," she said softly. I'll go. I don't want them to see this. Charles looked at her, eyes burning. You're not just walking out of here. You can't fight this right now, she said, her tone gentle, but firm. They'll make it harder for you. I don't care. But I do. Her voice broke on the last word. Mrs. Grant led the children upstairs as Maya gathered her coat. Lila's cries echoed through the hall. Charles followed her to the elevator. Tell me who did this, he demanded. Someone reported you. Who? It doesn't matter, Maya said. Maybe it was my brother. Maybe he was just scared for me. Then he'll answer to me. No, she said, her voice trembling. Don't make this worse. Please. Just promise me you'll be kind to them. Keep their world steady. Maya. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside, eyes glistening. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. Don't call me that, he said. Not after everything. She met his gaze, and for a second, all the walls between them fell away. Goodbye, Charles. The doors closed before he could reply. For the first time in months, the house went silent again. That night, the twins refused to eat. Lila sat by the window, whispering Maya's name like a prayer. Charles paced his study, hands trembling with rage and helplessness. He called every contact he had, every lawyer in his circle. By midnight, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I told you rich men ruin everything. No signature. But he knew. Marcus. The next morning, Charles didn't go to work. He sat at the kitchen table, his tie undone, his coffee untouched. Mrs. Grant entered quietly. The girls keep asking for her, she said. So am I, he whispered. You'll find her, she said softly. I know you will. By afternoon he did. It wasn't hard. Maya hadn't gone far. She was sitting on a park bench near Harlem, wrapped in her old beige coat, watching snow fall through bare branches. When he approached, she didn't turn. I figured you'd find me, she said. They're miserable without you, he said. So am I. She shook her head slowly. You can't say that. Why not? It's true. Because truth doesn't change what we are, she said. I'm your employee. You're a man who finally remembers what love looks like, he cut in. Her breath caught. Charles, you came into my house and fixed what I thought was beyond repair. My daughters, my heart, everything. You can't just disappear and call that peace. She turned to face him then, eyes full of quiet pain. You don't need me to save you. You just needed someone to remind you that you were never broken. And what if I don't want reminding? He asked. What if I just want you? For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. Then Maya stood, pulling her scarf tighter. You don't want me, Charles. You want what I made you feel. But feelings fade. The work doesn't. Then stay, he pleaded. Help me do the work. Her lips trembled. If I stay, I'll forget who I am, and you'll start to see me as someone I'm not. That's not true. It is, she whispered. And someday, your daughters will need their father, not a woman, to fill the silence. She stepped away, her boots crunching softly in the snow. You told me once grief teaches you to breathe again. Maybe this is how. He didn't follow. He just watched her walk away until the snow swallowed her shape. When he returned home that night, the girls were waiting at the door. Daddy, Lila whispered. Is she coming back? He knelt down, pulling them close. Not yet, he said, his voice breaking. But she'll always be here. He touched his chest. Right here. And as the night deepened outside, the Whitmore mansion stayed quiet but not hollow. Somewhere in its walls lingered the echo of her voice, the warmth she'd left behind. And though she was gone, the love she planted there had already taken root. 3 weeks passed. Winter loosened its grip, and New York began to thaw, though the Whitmore house still felt cold without her. The laughter had faded to whispers, the warmth she'd kindled replaced by echoes of absence. Charles did his best. He tried reading bedtime stories, cooking Sunday pancakes, even humming the lullaby Maya used to sing. But no matter what he did, the girls could tell something was missing. One night, he found Lila sitting by the window, holding the heart-shaped cookie cutter Maya had left behind. Daddy, she said softly, Is she mad at us? His chest tightened. No, sweetheart. She just needed time. Then we should give her a clock, the child said earnestly, so she knows when to come back. He smiled through the ache and kissed her forehead. Maybe you're right. The next morning, he made a decision. He asked Mrs. Grant to clear his schedule, cancel his meetings, and call his driver. Where are you going? She asked. To fix what I broke, he said simply. The streets of Harlem were busy with early spring air vendors shouting, kids chasing pigeons, music spilling from open doors. He parked near a small community center, the kind of place most people never noticed. Inside, laughter echoed through the hallway, mingled with piano notes and children's voices. He followed the sound. There she was. Maya stood at the center of a circle of children, guiding their small hands over piano keys. No rush, she said gently. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about feeling safe enough to try. Her voice was the same steady, warm, like sunlight that refused to fade. When she looked up and saw him, the air shifted. The children continued playing, unaware of the storm that gathered silently between them. Charles, she said, almost in disbelief. How did you? Mrs. Grant, he said. She found your volunteer listing. Maya glanced at the kids, then back at him. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said quietly. You belong with us. I belong where I can help, she replied. You are helping, he said. You think I don't see it? The girls are better because of you. I'm better because of you. But you walked away like none of it mattered. It mattered, she said firmly. That's why I left. He took a step closer. Then tell me how leaving makes sense. She hesitated. Because love can't grow where power lives, Charles. You're their father, their world. If I stayed, I would have blurred the lines. You think they care about lines? He said. All they know is you're gone. They wake up asking for you. Lila cries herself to sleep. And me? His voice cracked. I've been walking through that house, like a ghost. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I don't want to replace what Emma gave you, she said softly. Then don't, he said. Just be who you already are, the person who taught me to feel again. The children around them began to clap as one of the boys finished his song, breaking the tension for a moment. Maya smiled faintly at the boy, her eyes flicking back to Charles. I can't just walk back into your world, she said. It's not my place. Then let me come into yours, he said. I don't care where it is, this center, the subway, anywhere, as long as it's where you are. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. I do, he said. I've spent my life chasing success, but peace? He shook his head. You're the first person who ever made me feel it. Maya turned away, blinking hard. You're making this too big, Charles. It already is, he said. Because what you gave me isn't something I can forget. She looked back at him, and for a long time, neither moved. Then a voice called from behind Marcus. He stood at the doorway, arms folded, expression wary. Didn't expect to see you here, Mr. Billionaire. Charles tensed. You're the one who called child services, aren't you? Marcus didn't deny it. I did what I thought was right. My sister doesn't need saving by another rich man trying to fix his guilt. That's not what this is, Charles said, stepping closer. You don't know what we've been through. I know enough, Marcus snapped. Men like you always find a way to turn someone's kindness into dependency. Maya stepped between them. Stop, both of you. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut through the air. Marcus, he's not the enemy. And Charles, this isn't about proving something. It's about trust. The girls need stability, so do you. Marcus exhaled, his anger thinning into exhaustion. I just don't want to lose you again, sis. Maya touched his arm. You won't. Then she turned back to Charles. You need to understand something. I didn't come into your life to stay forever. I came to remind you of what you already had. Then remind me again, he said quietly, because I don't want to forget. For a moment, she almost broke. The way he said it bare, sincere, cut through every wall she'd built. "Come to the recital," she said finally. "Tomorrow evening. The kids are performing. That's where I belong now." He nodded. "Then that's where I'll be." The next day, the small auditorium at the Harlem Community Center filled with parents and neighbors. Folding chairs lined the room, the stage lit by warm yellow bulbs. Charles sat in the back with his daughters, dressed neatly, faces glowing with excitement. When Maya walked on stage, the room quieted. She introduced the children one by one, her voice steady but her eyes occasionally flicking toward the back toward him. The music began, soft and uncertain at first, then blooming into something pure. The children played with all their hearts, their small fingers finding courage in sound. When the last note faded, applause erupted. Charles stood, clapping louder than anyone. Maya bowed, her eyes finding his across the crowd. For a moment, everything disappeared, the people, the noise, the years of grief between them. Just two souls seeing each other clearly, finally unafraid. After the show, she approached him. The girls ran to her, hugging her knees. "You came back," Lila shouted. Maya laughed, tears spilling freely. "I told you I'd never really leave." Charles watched them, his heart heavy, but full. When the girls finally ran off to play, he said quietly, "You belong with us, Maya, maybe not as before, but as family." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "Family doesn't always live under one roof," she said. "Sometimes it lives in the heart." He nodded slowly. "Then mine just found its home." Outside, evening had fallen, and snowflakes began to drift again, gentler this time, as if blessing the moment. Maya smiled up at the sky, then at him. "Maybe peace isn't a place," she said softly. "Maybe it's people." He reached for her hand. "Then don't let go," and for the first time in years, neither of them did. Spring settled fully over Manhattan, painting the city in soft greens and golds. The air carried that delicate warmth between seasons, the kind that whispered of renewal. For the first time in years, the Whitmore house mirrored the world outside. Flowers bloomed on the terrace, laughter filled the hallways again, and sunlight poured through the open windows as if determined to stay. Maya now divided her days between the community center and the Whitmore estate. It wasn't the same as before, no uniforms, no titles, no walls of hierarchy, but something gentler had taken its place. Every afternoon, after her work with the children in Harlem, she arrived at the penthouse to find three little faces pressed against the glass, waiting for her. "You're late," Lila would cry, though she never really was. Maya would laugh, scoop her into her arms, and say, "Then you'd better make me tea as punishment." Even Mrs. Grant, once a stickler for routine, had softened into quiet affection. "You've made this place human again," she told Maya one morning as they arranged flowers in the dining room. "I didn't make it human," Maya replied. "I just reminded it how to breathe." But beneath the peace, something still stirred, a quiet tension neither she nor Charles dared to name. One evening, as the sky turned indigo, Maya found him alone on the terrace, sleeves rolled, staring at the horizon. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. He turned, smiling faintly. "You'd be overpaying." She joined him by the railing. The city below glittered, alive and restless. "I've been thinking," he said after a pause, "about what you told me, that love can't grow where power lives." Maya looked down. "I remember." "I want to change that," he said. "Not for me. For them." His gaze drifted toward the glass doors, where the girls were coloring on the floor, their laughter spilling softly into the night. "They deserve a father who leads with gentleness, not guilt." Maya smiled, pride flickering across her face. "You already are that man, Charles, only because you showed me how." He paused, studying her profile in the fading light. "I used to think I'd lost everything that made life mean something, but maybe losing it was the only way to see what truly mattered." She met his eyes, and for a brief moment, neither looked away. The air between them thickened with something unspoken, fragile but undeniable. "You've rebuilt your world," she said softly. "That's what matters." "It's not complete," he said. "Not yet." She hesitated, heart pounding. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." "Why?" he asked. "Because I can't be what you want me to be." "You already are," he said simply. She shook her head. "You don't understand. If I cross that line, I lose everything that keeps me steady." "And what about what keeps me steady?" he asked quietly. "You." Silence stretched between them. Then she said, her voice trembling, "You think this is love? Maybe it is. But love built on rescue isn't love. It's gratitude. And gratitude fades. Not this," he said. "What I feel doesn't fade." Her eyes glistened. "Then prove it. Let me go." His breath hitched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly, pain flickering across his face. "If that's what you need." "It's what we both need," she said. That night, Maya packed quietly, not to disappear but to return to her own path. Before leaving, she stopped by the girls' room. The three of them slept, huddled together, moonlight soft on their faces. She knelt beside them, brushing hair from their foreheads. "You're loved," she whispered, "always." Downstairs, she found Charles waiting by the door, his hands in his pockets. "You're not saying goodbye?" he asked. "Goodbyes are for endings," she said softly. "This isn't one." "Then what is it?" A pause, she said. "Every story needs one before it can begin again." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Take care of yourself, Maya." "You too, Charles." She turned toward the elevator, and before the doors closed, she said one last thing. "Tell them I'll come back when the flowers bloom twice." The elevator descended, carrying her away from the mansion but not from their hearts. Weeks passed. Spring deepened into early summer. The girls started speaking more freely, laughing more often. They planted new flowers on the terrace, and Lila insisted on watering them every morning, waiting for the second bloom. Charles kept himself busy with both work and home, but every night, when the city lights flickered against the glass, he found himself listening for the soft hum of her voice. One evening, while sorting through papers in his office, he found something tucked inside his journal, a letter. "Dear Charles," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I've found the courage to leave before I lose sight of why I came. You once told me grief taught you how to breathe again. I think you taught me the same. You gave me purpose when I'd forgotten mine. Don't look for me in the house or the city. Look for me in the laughter of your daughters, in the quiet moments before dawn, in the way peace feels when it finally comes to rest. That's where I'll be. Maya." His vision blurred before he reached the end. He closed the letter, holding it to his chest, and whispered, "You're still here." Months later, on a golden afternoon in late June, Mrs. Grant called from the terrace. "Sir, you need to see this." He stepped outside and froze. The flowers had bloomed again, brighter than before. Among them stood three small figures, the girls pointing excitedly toward the gate. And there she was, Maya, dressed in soft summer linen, sunlight catching her hair. She wasn't carrying luggage this time, only a small potted plant in her hands. "You said you'd come back when the flowers bloomed twice," Charles said, his voice barely a whisper. "I keep my promises," she replied. Lila ran into her arms, followed by the twins, their laughter breaking like music. Charles watched, his chest tight with something deeper than relief, something like faith. Maya looked up at him. "I didn't come back to stay," she said. "I came to see if what we built is still standing." "It is," he said quietly. "Because of you. Because of all of us," she corrected. The wind lifted her hair, sunlight pooling around them. For the first time, there were no walls, no fear, no unspoken rules, just understanding. "Welcome home," he said. She smiled, setting the potted plant on the terrace rail. "Home," she repeated softly. "Yes, that's exactly what this is." And as laughter filled the air once more, the Whitmore mansion, once silent and cold, stood alive again, not because of its walls or wealth, but because two souls had finally learned that love, in its truest form, doesn't chain, it frees. The summer sun stretched long and golden over Manhattan, softening the skyline and washing the Whitmore estate in a warmth that felt almost sacred. It had been 3 months since Maya's return, and though she still divided her time between the community center and the penthouse, her presence had woven itself into every corner of the house once again. The girls had flour on their noses more often than not. Their laughter danced through the halls like a melody that refused to fade. Charles had learned to slow down. He still worked, still built empires, but he'd begun measuring success in moments, not money. Every breakfast shared, every bedtime story told, it all counted in ways his old self would never have understood. That morning, he found Maya on the terrace, kneeling beside the garden boxes with a watering can. "You missed one," he said, pointing to a small pot tucked in the corner. She smiled without looking up. "No, I didn't. That one needs time. Some flowers only bloom when they're ready." "You always talk like the world listens to you," he said, leaning on the railing. "Maybe it does," she replied, "if you speak gently enough." He watched her in silence for a while. The wind played with the hem of her dress, and the sunlight caught the faint sheen of water on her hands. "Do you ever think about leaving again?" he asked finally. She froze for a heartbeat, then stood slowly. "Sometimes, but not for the same reasons." "What reasons then?" "To grow," she said softly. "To make sure I'm not just existing in your world, but in my own." "And if your world still includes us?" he asked. She looked at him, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Then maybe it's finally big enough." That afternoon, the community center hosted a small recital. The children Maya had taught were performing, and Charles came with the girls, all dressed in matching pale blue dresses. As they entered the hall, heads turned not because of his wealth, but because of the tenderness with which he carried himself now. Maya stood near the stage, helping a boy tune his violin. When she saw them, her face lit up. "You made it," she said. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied. The music began a simple melody, played by trembling hands and brave hearts. The girls clapped along, their eyes wide with joy. At one point, Lila leaned against her father's shoulder and whispered, "She's magic, isn't she?" Charles smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, she is." When the performance ended, Maya was flooded with hugs from her students. Charles waited until the room emptied before approaching her. "They adore you," he said. "They trust me," she corrected. "That's rarer than love sometimes." "Then you've earned both." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "You say that like it surprises you." "It doesn't," he said, "but it humbles me." Later, they walked together through the quiet streets of Harlem, the evening sky painted in lavender and rose. The air was thick with the scent of fried dough and music drifting from open windows. "You know," Maya said, "the first day I walked into your house, I thought I was walking into a storm." He chuckled. "You weren't wrong." "But storms pass," she said, "and sometimes they leave the ground softer for new things to grow." "Like what?" he asked. She smiled. "Like this." She gestured around them, the laughter, the colors, the life. "You found balance, Charles. That's your real empire." He stopped walking. "And you?" She met his gaze. "I found peace." "Do they feel the same to you?" he asked. She tilted her head, thinking, "Peace is quieter, but it lasts longer." He wanted to say more, but she slipped her hand into his and said, "Come on," before the girls fall asleep in the car. That night, back at the penthouse, the children dozed off quickly, worn out from the excitement. Maya tucked them in, smoothing their hair with that familiar tenderness. Charles stood in the doorway, watching. "You should have been a mother," he said quietly. She turned. "I am, just not by birth." He nodded slowly. "Emma would have loved you." "I hope so," she said. "I think she already knows." When the house fell silent, they returned to the terrace. The city pulsed below, alive but distant. Charles handed her a cup of tea, his fingers brushing hers. "You know," he said, "for the first time in a long time, I don't feel afraid of tomorrow. That's how you know you're living," she said, "when tomorrow doesn't scare you anymore." They stood there for a long while, saying nothing. The air was soft, the sky vast and endless. Then, faintly, a breeze carried the sound of laughter, the twins talking in their sleep, dreaming perhaps of flowers and sunlight. Maya smiled. "They're healing," she said. "So are we." "Do you think healing ever really ends?" he asked. "No," she said. "It just changes shape." He looked at her then, not as the woman who had worked for him, not as the savior of his family, but as someone whose soul had intertwined with his in quiet, irrevocable ways. "Maya," he said softly, "if I asked you to stay this time not out of need, but out of choice, would you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the city, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd stay as long as I'm meant to." "And how long is that?" "As long as the flowers keep blooming." He smiled, accepting her answer for what it was. Not a promise, but something deeper. When she turned to leave, he caught her hand gently. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For teaching me that love doesn't have to be loud to last." Maya's eyes shimmered. "And for me," she said, "for showing me that broken things can still hold light." The next morning, sunlight spilled across the city, warm and golden. In the Whitmore garden, the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The smallest pot, the one Maya said needed time, had finally begun to bloom. A single white petal unfurled toward the light. And inside the house, laughter began again, soft and sure, like the echo of everything they'd fought to rebuild. Maya stood by the window, watching the city awaken, her heart steady and full. The mansion wasn't just a place anymore. It was proof that no matter how fractured the past, love, in its quiet persistence, always finds its way home. Autumn came quietly that year, slipping into the city like a memory that refused to fade. The leaves along Central Park turned gold, the air crisp and filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts and rain. The Whitmore house, once cold and cavernous, now carried a rhythm of life so natural it was hard to remember it hadn't always been this way. Maya's laughter mingled with the children's voices. Soft music drifted from the piano room where she taught them simple tunes. Even Mrs. Grant had learned to slow down, smiling more often, humming under her breath as she worked. For Charles, every morning began with gratitude, a feeling that had once been foreign to him. He'd wake early just to hear the quiet sounds of life downstairs. The kettle whistling, the soft thud of tiny feet running across the floor, Maya's gentle voice coaxing the girls to eat their breakfast. Each sound reminded him that peace was not something grand or distant. It was the sum of small, steadfast moments. One late afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the windows, Maya sat with the girls at the dining table, helping them with art projects. "This one's for you," Lila said proudly, handing her a crayon drawing. Maya smiled. It showed the five of them, Charles, the girls, Mrs. Grant, and herself standing under a rainbow. Above them, written in a child's careful scrawl, were the words "Family Forever." "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, her throat tight. "Is that us?" "Yes," Lila giggled. "And that's you in the middle because you make everyone smile." Charles had been standing in the doorway, unseen until that moment. "She's right," he said softly. Maya turned, surprised, and caught his gaze. There was warmth in his eyes, but also something deeper, something that had been waiting patiently since the day she'd first walked into his home. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, they found themselves on the terrace again. The air was cool, the city below glowing like a sea of stars. "Do you ever think about what's next?" he asked quietly. She looked out at the skyline. "All the time, and I don't know," she admitted. "For so long, my life was about surviving one day to the next. I never thought much about what comes after peace." "Maybe that's the point," he said. "Peace isn't what comes after. It's what you live in, once you stop running." She smiled faintly. "You sound like me." "I've been taking notes," he teased. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then, out of nowhere, Charles said, I want to fund the community center. Maya turned sharply. What? You've been doing it on your own for years, he said. Teaching those kids, helping families, it deserves more than patchwork funding and volunteers. Charles, you don't need to. I want to. He interrupted gently. Not as charity, as partnership. She hesitated, her heart racing. Partnership? Yes, he said. You once told me love can't grow where power lives, so let's build something where it can equal, real, something that lasts. She looked at him for a long time, her eyes shimmering in the city light. You mean that? With everything I am. That night, neither of them slept much. Plans formed in sketches and whispers the idea of a new learning center, a place that merged his resources with her purpose. By morning, it had a name, the Whitmore Foundation for Learning and Hope. Over the next few months, the project became a heartbeat shared between them. Maya handled the design and education programs. Charles oversaw funding and infrastructure. Together, they built something far greater than either could have imagined. The opening ceremony was small but full of life. Children from Harlem and downtown Manhattan gathered under a banner painted by Maya's students. Every heart can learn. As she stood before the crowd, Charles at her side, Maya took a deep breath. This building, she said, isn't about wealth or power. It's about second chances, the kind that don't care where you come from, only where you're brave enough to go. Her voice wavered slightly, but her eyes stayed bright. This started as one family learning to heal. Now, it belongs to all of us. The audience applauded, and when she stepped back, Charles reached for her hand. You did it, he whispered. No, she said. We did. As the applause faded, he leaned closer. You've changed my daughter's lives, Maya. Mine too. If I've learned anything, it's that love isn't something you fall into, it's something you choose, every single day. She looked up at him, her chest tightening. And what are you choosing now? You, he said. And this life, not as a fairy tale, but as something real. For the first time, she didn't turn away. Her eyes softened, and she smiled. Then maybe it's time I stop running. That night, the Whitmore house glowed from within. The children slept peacefully. Mrs. Grant quietly wiped tears of pride in the kitchen. On the terrace, under the sweep of city lights, Charles and Maya stood side by side, hands intertwined. You ever think about how it all began? He asked. A crying child, she said, a stranger's voice shouting down a hallway. And now? Now, she said softly. It feels like the world is finally listening. He pulled her gently into his arms, and for the first time, she let herself rest there, no hesitation, no fear. Below them, the city breathed, vast and alive. But for once, it felt small enough to hold. In the distance, church bells chimed. Their sound carried on the wind. You know, Maya murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, I used to think love was something that left you empty when it ended. And now? He asked. Now I think real love doesn't end. It just changes its form like music. Like light. Like us, he said. She smiled against his shoulder. Exactly like us. The wind swept through the terrace, scattering the petals from the flower boxes. They danced in the air, glowing white under the city lights before settling gently at their feet. Charles looked down and said quietly, The flowers bloomed again. Maya laughed softly. They always do, Charles. That's the secret, you just have to keep watering them. And as night wrapped around the city, the Whitmore family, once broken, once lost, stood whole again. Not perfect, not untouched by pain, but whole. Because love, as Maya had taught them all, wasn't a miracle. It was a choice. And in that moment, beneath the endless sky, they chose each other again and again and again. Winter crept back into the city with quiet grace, dusting the rooftops of Manhattan in silver. The Whitmore house glowed against the cold, its windows warm with the pulse of family life. It had been nearly a year since the foundation opened, and its impact rippled far beyond what Maya or Charles had imagined. The community center had become a refuge, a place where music, laughter, and learning intertwined, where forgotten children found purpose and adults rediscovered hope. But on this morning, as snow fell gently outside, Maya stood before the mirror in her small apartment above the center, fastening a pin on her coat. Her reflection showed peace, but also something heavier change. A letter lay open on her desk. It was from a university in Chicago, offering her a position as director of a new, inclusive education program. She'd been chosen because of her work with the Whitmore Foundation. It was everything she'd ever wanted, and everything that could take her away. A soft knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, Charles was standing there, snow in his hair, a smile tugging at his lips. "You walk faster than your messages," she teased gently. "I didn't want to text this," he said. "I wanted to see your face. You found it." He stepped inside, shaking off his coat. "Mrs. Grant told me about the letter." Maya's breath hitched. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." "You weren't going to tell me?" "I was waiting until I knew what to say." "And now?" She sighed. "I still don't." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city hummed faintly below them, muffled by snow. "Chicago," he said finally. "That's far." "It's an opportunity," she said quietly, "for something bigger than me." "Bigger than us," he corrected, his voice soft but steady. She met his gaze, seeing the hurt there, but also pride. "You, of all people, should understand," she said. "You taught me to build something that outlasts the moment." He nodded slowly, stepping closer. "I do understand. But I also know the moment matters too." "Charles, just let me say it," he said, his tone almost pleading. "I won't stop you. I won't ask you to stay. I just need you to know that if you go, what we built, doesn't vanish. It grows because of you." She swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But love never was." She looked away, her hands trembling. "You think I don't feel this too? That I haven't spent nights wondering how to leave something that feels like home? Then don't leave," he said. "Not forever, just long enough to become who you're meant to be." Her eyes filled, and she whispered, "You always say the right thing at the worst time." He smiled sadly. "That's because I finally learned to listen." That evening, she joined him and the girls for dinner. The air was heavy with unspoken emotion. But the children didn't notice. They chattered about school, about the snow, about the upcoming winter recital. "Maya," Lila said suddenly, "will you help us with our song tomorrow?" Maya froze. "Tomorrow?" "At the center," Charles explained. "They want to dedicate the new wing. The girls are performing." Maya forced a smile. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." The next day, the community center was alive with celebration. Parents, teachers, and city officials filled the hall, the walls lined with photographs of the children's art. Maya stood near the piano, helping the girls tune their instruments. When the music began, the sound filled the room pure, fragile, full of light. Charles stood in the back, his eyes fixed on them. He wasn't watching the event, he was watching her. After the applause died down, the mayor approached the podium. "The Whitmore Foundation has become a model for our city," he said. "And it's all thanks to the vision of one woman, Maya Williams." The room erupted into cheers. Maya's heart pounded. She hadn't expected this. When she stepped forward, Charles handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she whispered. "Just read it," he said. Inside was a single plane ticket to Chicago, and beneath it, a note written in his steady handwriting. "Go build what you were born to build. You've already given us everything we needed." She looked up, her eyes wet. "Charles," he smiled softly, "you told me love doesn't chain. It frees. So go be free." She tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she hugged him tightly, whispering, "You'll always be home, and you'll always be our heart," he replied. That night, after the celebration, she sat by the terrace one last time. The city below sparkled under the snow, each light a small heartbeat of memory. She could hear the faint sound of the girls laughing upstairs, their voices mingling with the wind. Charles stepped outside quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "So this is goodbye," he said. "For now," she answered. "I'll come back when the first snow melts. You'll miss the frost," he teased. "Then you'll have to save me some." They stood in silence, sipping tea, watching the snow fall. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Leaving?" "No," she said. "Because leaving isn't the opposite of loving. It's just another way to keep it alive." He nodded. "Then promise me one thing. Anything." "Keep writing," he said. "Your letters always sound like prayers." She smiled. "That's because they are." The next morning, she was gone before dawn. The city still slept as her taxi pulled away from the curb. Charles stood by the window, watching until the headlights vanished. Upstairs, the girls stirred in their sleep, one of them murmuring her name. He whispered into the quiet, "She'll be back." Weeks later, spring crept back over Manhattan. The flowers on the terrace began to bloom again, small and defiant against the wind. The girls played among them, their laughter rising into the air. Inside, on the piano, sat a letter addressed to the Whitmore family. Charles opened it, his hands trembling slightly. "The snow melted early this year," it began. "Maybe that's a sign. The city here feels different, but I carry you all with me. Every note I teach, every child I meet, it's like hearing our music again. Tell the girls the flowers will bloom twice this season. I just know it. With love, Maya." He folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the piano. The girls ran to him, tugging his sleeve. "Daddy, come look, the flowers." He smiled, following them outside. The terrace was alive again, vivid, hopeful, new, and somewhere far away, in another city, a woman smiled at the same sky, whispering a promise she intended to keep. Because love, real love, wasn't bound by walls or miles. It lived where hearts remembered, and theirs always would. By the time spring gave way to summer, the Whitmore household had found its rhythm again, different, quieter, but full of quiet grace. The girls had grown taller, their laughter brighter, their confidence stronger. The community center thrived under new leadership, still bearing Maya's fingerprints in every corner, from the child-painted murals on the walls to the music program she had designed herself. Yet for Charles, the house often felt suspended between 2 worlds, the one she had left behind, and the one she had inspired him to keep alive. Every morning he still poured 2 cups of coffee by instinct, only to smile at the empty chair across from him. It wasn't grief this time, it was gratitude wearing the clothes of longing. One afternoon, he sat on the terrace watching the city move far below. The flowers had bloomed early, just as she'd written, and a soft wind carried the scent of lilac through the air. "Mrs. Grant appeared beside him, setting down a tray of lemonade. "You're thinking of her again," she said gently. "Always," he replied. "Then it's not thinking," she said. "It's remembering." He nodded, his gaze drifting toward the skyline. "The girls talk about her every night. Lila keeps asking if love can travel through letters." Mrs. Grant smiled faintly. "Maybe you should tell her it already has." That evening, after tucking the twins into bed, he found Lila sitting by the piano, fingers tracing the keys softly. "Play something," he said. "I don't know what to play," she murmured. "Then play what you feel." She hesitated, then pressed a few uncertain notes. The melody wobbled, searching for itself, then steadied. Charles closed his eyes. It was Maya's song, the lullaby she'd hummed that first night the power went out. He listened until the last note faded, his chest tight but warm. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "It's her song," Lila said softly. "I didn't want it to disappear." "It never will," he promised. "Not as long as we keep playing." Weeks later, the Whitmore Foundation hosted its first anniversary gala. The hall gleamed with light and laughter, filled with families, donors, and children whose lives had been changed. At the center of it all stood Charles, dignified yet humble, as he greeted guests and gave a short speech. "A year ago," he began, "this was only an idea, a dream built on pain, loss, and the hope that love could do more than heal one family. Today, It's proof that compassion outlives circumstance. He paused, his voice lowering slightly. The person who began this journey isn't here tonight, but she's everywhere in every smile, in every song, in every child who now believes they matter. And for that, I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. The room fell silent, a reverent stillness filling the air. When the applause finally broke, it was soft, heartfelt, and full of meaning. Later that night, as the guests departed, Charles stepped outside into the warm summer air. He loosened his tie and took a deep breath, the sounds of the city fading into the hum of memory. A car pulled up near the curb, its headlights cutting across the driveway. He didn't expect anything unusual until he saw her. Maya stepped out, the same calm grace about her, though her eyes carried new stories. She wore a pale blue dress that caught the moonlight, and in her hands she held a small bouquet of white tulips. For a moment, neither moved. "You came," he said finally, his voice rough. "I told you I'd come back when the snow melted," she replied softly. "You just forgot to ask which one." He laughed quietly, the sound breaking something open in him. "You look exactly like home, and you look like you finally found peace," she said. He stepped closer, his heart thudding. "Chicago, it's going well," she said. "The program's growing, but I missed the noise here, the chaos, the heartbeat." His eyes softened. "You mean them, all of you," she said, her voice trembling. The front door opened then, and the girls came rushing out in their nightgowns. "Maya!" they shouted in unison, their voices echoing through the courtyard. She dropped the flowers as they threw their arms around her. "You kept your promise," Lila cried. Maya hugged them tightly, her eyes glistening. "I told you flowers always bloom twice." Charles stood a few feet away, watching the scene unfold with something close to reverence. When she finally rose and turned to him, her smile was soft but steady. "You did it," she said. "You kept everything alive. Because you planted it," he replied. They stood there, surrounded by laughter and the faint scent of tulips. The city glowed around them, alive and eternal. "Will you stay this time?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I don't know if I'll ever stay in one place again," she said honestly, "but I'm not leaving love behind anymore. Wherever I go, this comes with me." "Then that's enough," he said. "For all of us." Inside, the girls began playing the piano Maya's song again. This time steadier, fuller, alive. The notes floated through the open doors, weaving into the night air. Maya and Charles stepped inside, side by side, following the sound. The house looked the same as ever, yet different, warmer, brighter, truly alive. "Do you ever think about the beginning?" she asked softly. "Every day," he said. "You walked into a house full of ghosts and gave it a soul." They stood together, watching the girls play, their laughter echoing through the room like sunlight made into sound. Charles reached for her hand, not out of longing this time, but gratitude. Deep and quiet. She didn't pull away. The song ended, but the moment didn't. And as the last notes lingered in the air, Maya whispered, "You know what I've learned, Charles?" "What?" "That sometimes love isn't about forever. It's about returning." He looked at her, the corners of his mouth curving upward. "Then welcome home, Maya." Outside, the night shimmered with city lights, and above them, the moon hung low and full. The flowers on the terrace swayed gently in the wind, alive, radiant, unbroken, just like the people inside who had finally learned what it meant to love without fear. And in that quiet, perfect moment, everything that had once been lost was found again. Autumn returned again, softer this time, its wind carrying the scent of apples and rain through the streets of Manhattan. The city had settled into its quiet rhythm, steady, relentless, alive, and so had the Whitmore family. It had been nearly a year since Maya's return, and though her life was now split between Chicago and New York, her presence still lingered like sunlight that never fully left a room. Every month, she came back for a few days to see the girls, to visit the foundation, to walk the familiar terrace where everything had once begun. And every time she arrived, the house seemed to breathe easier. On this particular morning, the girls were decorating pumpkins for the school fair. Lila had orange paint smeared across her cheek, while the twins argued over who could make the cuter face. Maya sat with them on the floor, laughing as she tried to mediate. "How about this?" she said, holding up a pumpkin with mismatched eyes and a crooked grin. "We call him Mr. Imperfect and we all win." The girls giggled in agreement. From the kitchen doorway, Charles leaned against the frame, watching the scene with quiet contentment. There was something about the way Maya's laughter filled the house that made everything else, his meetings, his deadlines, even his pride, fade into background noise. When she noticed him, she smiled. "You're staring," she teased. "Guilty," he said, crossing the room. "But in my defense, it's hard not to." The girls rolled their eyes in unison. "Ew, Daddy," Maya laughed, shaking her head. "You're teaching them all the wrong things. Or the right ones," he countered. "Depends who you ask." That night, after the girls were asleep, they stood together on the terrace. The city stretched below them, its skyline glittering like a memory of light. The air was cool, the kind of evening that made the heart slow down, just enough to listen. "You've been quiet lately," Charles said. "Something on your mind?" Maya hesitated, her fingers tracing the railing. "I got an offer," she said finally, "from the State Department. They're launching a national program for special education reform. They want me to lead it." "That's incredible," he said. "You should be proud." "I am," she said softly. "But it would mean moving again. DC this time." His chest tightened, though he kept his tone even. "How long?" 2 years. The silence that followed was long but not heavy. It was the silence of two people who had learned that love doesn't need to beg, it only needs to understand. "I told you once I'd never hold you back," he said finally. "And I meant it." "You've already given me so much," she said. "You gave me a reason to believe that what I do matters." "You gave me more," he replied. "You gave me a reason to feel again." They stood close, the city hum fading beneath the sound of their breathing. "I'll come back," she said. "You always do," he said with a small smile. "That's what I count on." The next morning, the house was alive with chaos, the good kind. Suitcases in the hallway, breakfast on the stove, the twins fighting over who got to pack Maya's scarf. "You can't take all her things," Lila protested. "She needs them." "No," Maya said gently. "I don't need much. I already have what matters." "Us?" Lila asked, her eyes wide. "Always you," Maya said, kissing her forehead. Charles stood by the door as the car pulled up outside. "You'll visit?" he asked quietly. "Every chance I get," she said. "And you'll keep writing?" "Until my pen runs dry," he smiled, holding her gaze. "Then I'll keep waiting." She laughed softly. "You always were stubborn. It's how I survived you." They hugged, long and unhurried. The girls joined in, clinging to her legs until she promised again and again that she'd come back. When she finally stepped into the car, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive in a new way, as if her leaving was just another form of presence. Weeks turned into months. Maya's new role consumed her, but every letter she sent carried a piece of her heart. She wrote to the girls about courage, about kindness, about learning from mistakes. To Charles, her words were quieter, deeper, written between the lines. "Sometimes I still hear the song from that night." One letter read, the one the girls played on the piano. "When things get hard here, I hum it, and it brings me home." At the foundation, her vision grew. They launched new programs for underprivileged schools, partnered with universities, and expanded into 3 more cities. Every success felt like a ripple from that first moment, a maid in a mansion hearing a child cry and choosing to listen. One evening, nearly a year later, as snow began to fall again, Charles received a call. "Mr. Whitmore," the voice said, "there's someone waiting for you downstairs." He went to the lobby, expecting a courier. Instead, he found Maya standing there with snowflakes in her hair, a worn suitcase by her side, and that same soft smile that had once changed his life. "You said you'd come back when the flowers bloomed twice," he said. "I guess snow counts too," she replied. "The job?" Finished, she said. And the foundation? Still growing, he said. They never stopped talking about you. Good, she said. Then maybe I did something right. He stepped closer. You did everything right. The elevator ride back up was silent but full. When the doors opened, the girls came running. Maya, they shouted, voices echoing through the marble halls. You're home. She knelt, arms wide, tears streaming down her face. I'm home, she whispered. That night, as snow blanketed the city, the family gathered by the fireplace. The girls played softly on the piano. The familiar lullaby filled the air again. Charles and Maya stood side by side, their hands brushing, their eyes meeting across the flickering light. You know, she said quietly, when I first walked into this house, I thought it was broken. It was, he said, until you taught it to love again. She looked at him, her voice trembling. Maybe I needed it to teach me the same. He smiled, pulling her close. Then we fixed each other. Outside, the snow kept falling slow, endless, and full of promise. And inside the Whitmore home, laughter rose once more, soft and real, wrapping itself around the walls like a heartbeat that would never fade. For love had come full circle, not as rescue, not as need, but as quiet truth. And as the night deepened, Maya whispered, this time, I'm not leaving. Charles kissed her forehead and said, I know. The fire crackled. The children's laughter filled the air, and somewhere beyond the glass, the city glowed alive, forgiving, and at peace. The flowers would bloom again, just as they always had. Winter settled softly over the Whitmore estate, blanketing the garden in white. The city lights shimmered beyond the frosted windows, and inside, the warmth of the fireplace carried laughter, music, and a feeling of peace that had long been missing. Maya stood in the kitchen early one morning, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, watching the first light of dawn slip across the snow. It had been months since her return, months of quiet mornings, long talks, and the tender rebuilding of a life she once thought she had to leave behind. Charles joined her a moment later, still in his robe, his hair slightly tousled. You're up early again, he said, his voice low. Old habits, she replied with a small smile. In Chicago, I used to wake before sunrise to beat the traffic. Now I just listen. To what? To the house, she said. It breathes differently now. Lighter, he smiled, pouring himself a cup. That's because it finally forgave itself. They shared a comfortable silence. For the first time in years, there were no hidden tensions, no buried grief. The girls were thriving, the foundation stronger than ever. But Maya, in her quiet way, felt something shifting, a sense that her story here wasn't ending, but beginning again. Later that morning, as she walked through the community center, she noticed a boy sitting alone on the steps, shivering in a thin jacket. His skin was pale, his eyes dark with exhaustion. Maya approached slowly. Hey there, she said softly. You cold? He nodded, not meeting her eyes. What's your name? Eli, he mumbled. You waiting for someone, Eli? No. I was just resting. She studied him. You hungry? His hesitation told her everything. Without another word, she extended her hand. Come on. We've got warm food inside. Over a bowl of soup, he told her his story 12 years old. His mother in rehab, living in a shelter across town. He'd come to the center by accident, following the sound of music from the street. I used to play, he said, before everything. Maya looked toward the piano in the corner. You still can, she said gently. It's waiting. He shook his head. I'm not good anymore. Music doesn't care about good, she said. It only cares about truth. Slowly, hesitantly, he stood and walked to the piano. When his fingers touched the keys, a soft melody emerged, uneven, fragile, but real. Maya felt her throat tighten. It was the same tune her girls had played the night she returned home. That evening, when she told Charles about Eli, he listened quietly. "You want to take him in, don't you?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not take in, just make sure he has a chance." "You sound like someone I used to know," he said, smiling. She walked into a mansion one day and refused to let anyone feel small again. Maya laughed softly. "She sounds stubborn." "She still is," he said. The next few weeks were filled with small miracles. Eli began coming to the center every day, playing, studying, learning. The girls adored him, treating him like a little brother. Even the staff noticed the change in the air. Maya's presence seemed to pull kindness out of everyone. One afternoon, during a snowstorm, Maya stood by the window, watching Eli help Lila build a snowman outside. "You see that?" Charles said, stepping beside her. "That's you. That's what you do to people." She looked at him, her voice quiet. "I just listen." "No," he said. "You heal." He turned to her then, his expression more serious. "Maya, there's something I've been meaning to say." "Charles." "No, let me finish." He took her hand. "You've spent your life giving everyone else a home. You built foundations, programs, hope, but when are you going to let someone build one for you?" Her eyes softened. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm not asking," he said, smiling slightly. "I'm telling you, you already did." She blinked back tears, unable to speak. The moment lingered. Quiet and perfect. The next day, the Whitmore Foundation announced a new initiative, the Harmony Project, a mentorship program for children like Eli, combining education and art therapy. It was Maya's idea, of course. The press called it revolutionary. Charles called it just Maya being Maya. Months passed, and winter slowly loosened its grip. The city thawed into spring, flowers blooming once again on the terrace. One afternoon, as the family gathered for the project's first student recital, Maya stood backstage, helping Eli adjust his bow tie. "You nervous?" she asked. "A little." "Good," she said. "That means you care. You'll be out there, right?" "Always." When he stepped on stage, his small hands trembling, the entire audience hushed. Then he began to play soft at first, then steady, then soaring. The melody filled the hall with light, and when he finished, the crowd rose to its feet. Maya's eyes shimmered. Beside her, Charles whispered, "You found another heartbeat." She smiled. "They find me." After the event, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya and Charles walked home hand in hand. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. "Every day," she said. "But what amazes me more is how far we can still go." He stopped, looking at her. "So where do we go next?" She smiled, glancing up at the sky. "Wherever there's someone still crying for help." He chuckled softly. "Then we're never out of work." "Good," she said, "because I was never good at being idle." They reached the terrace just as the city lights began to glow. The girls were chasing fireflies, their laughter rising like music into the night. Maya leaned against the railing, watching them. "You know," she said, "every time I see them laugh, it feels like the world is right again." Charles slipped his arm around her. "It is," he said, "because you made it so." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, Charles, we did." And in that moment between the laughter of children and the hum of the city, there was peace. Not the fragile kind that fades, but the kind that lasts, built from pain, shaped by love, and carried by faith in something greater. The wind brushed past them gently, carrying the faint echo of piano keys from somewhere inside. Maya closed her eyes, listening. The house still breathed, alive with all the stories it held, and she finally knew, deep in her soul, that this was home. The years began to pass quietly, marked not by headlines or charity galas, but by the soft rhythm of ordinary life. The Whitmore estate, once a symbol of loneliness, had become something else entirely, a sanctuary. The laughter of children echoed through its marble halls, the smell of pancakes and maple syrup filled the mornings, and music, always music, drifted from the piano room each evening like prayer. Maya Williams had found peace, though she never stopped working. Her name had become synonymous with compassion. Schools across the state used her programs, and her foundation had expanded far beyond what she ever imagined. Yet despite all the accolades, she still preferred the small things. Tying a ribbon in Lila's hair, planting tulips on the terrace, or sitting quietly beside Charles as the city glowed beneath them. One morning, as she sorted through letters at the kitchen table, she found one that made her pause. The envelope bore the seal of a prestigious university. She read it twice, her fingers trembling. "Dr. Williams," it began, "we are honored to inform you that you have been nominated for the National Humanitarian Medal for your contributions to education and social equity." She stared at the words for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or cry. When Charles entered, still in his jogging clothes, she handed it to him wordlessly. He read it, then looked up at her, eyes full of pride. "You deserve this," he said simply. "It's not just me," she murmured. "It never was." "Then we'll accept it together," he said. "The girls, the foundation, everyone whose lives you've touched, they're part of this too." That evening, the family gathered for dinner to celebrate. Eli, now 15, taller and more confident, toasted her with a grin. "To Miss Maya, the woman who never gave up on any of us." The girls chimed in, their glasses clinking. Maya laughed, her heart full, yet beneath the joy, she felt a strange ache and awareness of how fragile happiness can be. That night, as she stood by the window watching snow begin to fall again, Charles came up behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "You're thinking again," he said. "I'm just grateful," she whispered. "All this, it's more than I ever dreamed. You built it," he said, "brick by brick, with faith and stubbornness." She turned to face him. "No, Charles, we built it, together." He smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "Then, let's keep building." Weeks later, they traveled to Washington for the award ceremony. The grand ballroom glimmered under crystal chandeliers. Politicians, philanthropists, and journalists filled the seats, but Maya felt strangely calm. When her name was called, she walked to the stage amid a standing ovation. The medal felt heavy in her hand, not because of its weight, but because of everything it symbolized. She took a breath before speaking. "This award isn't mine alone," she began. "It belongs to every child who dared to dream despite being told they couldn't. It belongs to every teacher, parent, and volunteer who chose kindness over comfort. And it belongs to one family who believed that love could rebuild what grief once destroyed." Her voice caught slightly, but she didn't stop. "When I first met the Whitmore family, I was just a maid. I didn't have power or status. I only had empathy, and sometimes that's all it takes to change a life." The audience rose in applause. But what mattered most was the look on Charles's face. Pride, admiration, and something deeper, love. Quiet but unbreakable. After the ceremony, they walked together through the city streets, the lights reflecting off the Potomac River. "You spoke from the heart," he said. "That's the only place worth speaking from," she replied. "You've changed so many lives, Maya. Do you ever stop to realize that?" She smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But most days, I just keep moving forward. There's always more to do." "Then let me help you do it," he said. She stopped, turning to him. The air was cold, but his eyes were warm. "You already do," she whispered. Months later, back in New York, life slipped into its gentle rhythm again. The girls started middle school. Eli received a scholarship to a music academy, and the foundation launched new programs for veterans' families. Maya found joy in the details, in morning walks through Central Park, in reading bedtime stories, in watching the light shift through the windows at sunset. Yet one morning, while reviewing plans for a new center, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. It passed quickly, but it left her shaken. She brushed it off, blaming exhaustion. But Charles noticed. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," he said one evening. Promise me you'll see a doctor. She smiled to reassure him. I'm fine, Charles, just tired. But the truth was, she wasn't fine. The doctors later told her it was stress-induced cardiomyopathy, temporary, but serious if ignored. When she finally confessed, Charles was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, "You've spent your whole life healing others. Now it's time to let yourself rest." "I don't know how," she admitted. He took her hand. "Then I'll teach you." From that day forward, he insisted she slow down. He brought her tea in bed, took over meetings, and even canceled a few of his own appointments just to sit beside her. At first, she protested, but eventually, she surrendered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Maya sat on the terrace wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker. The girls played piano inside, the melody soft and familiar. Charles joined her, setting a cup of chamomile tea beside her. "You know what I realized today?" she said. "What's that?" "That peace doesn't come when everything stops. It comes when you finally stop running." He nodded, his eyes gentle. "You've earned that peace, Maya." "No," she said with a smile. "We earned it." And as the night deepened, they sat together in silence, no words needed. Only the steady rhythm of breathing, the distant hum of the city, and the faint sound of children laughing in the background. For the first time in years, Maya let herself simply be. The world no longer demanded from her, it simply embraced her. Spring arrived with a gentle kind of promise. The city awoke in soft colors, and the Whitmore garden burst into life again, tulips, daisies, and the familiar lilacs that Maya loved most. She moved slower these days, but her smile was still radiant, her spirit unbroken. The doctor's warning had changed her pace, not her purpose. She had learned to balance rest with meaning, to listen to her body as carefully as she once listened to others. On a bright morning in April, she sat with Lila and the twins on the terrace, painting small clay pots for their garden club. The girls' laughter floated into the air like music. "Mom," Lila asked suddenly, "when did you start liking flowers?" Maya looked up from her brush, surprised by the question. "When I realized they bloom even after winter tries to bury them," she said softly. "They don't give up. They just wait for the right light." Charles appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Sounds like someone I know," he said, handing her one. Persistent, impossible to uproot. She smiled, brushing her fingers against his. "You make it sound like a compliment." "It is," he replied. "You taught this house how to live again." Life was peaceful, almost deceptively so. But beneath the calm surface, Maya felt something stirring in her heart. The foundation had grown into a national organization, and there were requests pouring in for her to travel, to lead, to expand. Everyone wanted a piece of her time, her voice, her vision. Yet all she wanted was this: the quiet mornings, the laughter, the music. One evening, after dinner, Charles found her sitting at the piano. The soft lamplight caught the curve of her shoulders as she played the lullaby, the same one she'd hummed years ago when everything was broken. "I've been thinking," she said without turning. "Dangerous," he teased, moving closer. "What about?" "About legacy," she said. "About what we leave behind when we're gone." His smile faded slightly. "You're not going anywhere, Charles," she said gently. "I'm not dying. I'm planning." He sat beside her. "Then what do you want to build next?" She paused, her fingers resting on the keys. "A school," she said finally. "For children like ours, those who see the world differently, who don't fit neatly into boxes. A place that teaches empathy as much as arithmetic." He looked at her for a long moment, admiration in his eyes. "You never stop dreaming, do you?" "Dreaming is what saved me," she said quietly. "It's what saves all of us." That night, they drafted the first sketches for the Whitmore Academy of Compassion and Learning. The idea spread quickly soon. Donors, teachers, and families rallied around it. Construction began that summer on a plot of land just outside the city. Maya visited the site often, standing in her wide-brimmed hat, watching workers pour foundations. Sometimes she brought the girls, Other times, she came alone, just to feel the wind on her face and imagine the laughter that would one day fill the classrooms. But progress brought exhaustion too. She began skipping meals, working late into the night, reviewing designs, answering letters. One evening, Charles found her asleep at her desk, papers scattered around her. He covered her gently with a blanket and whispered, "You've done enough for one lifetime." When she awoke hours later, the house was dark, the city silent. She walked quietly to the girls' room, watching them sleep. Their faces, peaceful and safe, reminded her why she'd started all this in the first place. She whispered a prayer not for strength, but for grace. The academy opened 2 years later, on a clear September morning. The ceremony drew hundreds of teachers, parents, students, city leaders. Maya stood on the stage in a navy dress, her hair touched with silver, her heart full. When it was her turn to speak, she paused, looking at the crowd. "Years ago," she began, "I walked into a house where silence was heavier than grief. I didn't know then that love could rebuild a life. But I learned that day that healing isn't loud, it's patient, it's kind, and it begins with listening." She gestured toward the building behind her, its white stone glowing in the sunday. "This school is built on that same belief that every child deserves to be seen, not fixed, to be heard, not judged, and that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person who chooses to care." The applause that followed was thunderous, but what struck her most was seeing Eli in the front row, now grown, a music teacher at the very academy she had founded. He smiled at her, eyes full of pride. After the ceremony, he approached her quietly. "You once told me music doesn't care about good," he said, "only about truth. I tell that to my students every day." Maya's eyes softened. "And what do they say?" "They ask where I learned it," he said with a grin. "I tell them from the woman who saved me." Tears welled in her eyes as she hugged him. "You saved yourself, Eli. I just reminded you how." As the day faded into evening, the family returned home. The girls ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the garden. Maya and Charles followed slowly, their hands intertwined. "You did it," he said quietly. "You built everything you ever dreamed of." "No," she said. "We built everything that mattered." They stood on the terrace, watching the sunset wash the sky in gold and pink. The city buzzed below, alive and endless. "You know what I realized today?" she said softly. "What?" "That love isn't about staying forever," she said. "It's about building something that does." He turned to her, eyes glistening. "Then you've already done that, Maya. You've built something eternal." The wind carried the faint sound of children's laughter from the distance, blending with the rustle of the garden flowers. She leaned against his shoulder, closing her eyes. "Then maybe it's time," she whispered. "Time to rest." "You can rest," he said. "The world's finally caught up to your heart." She smiled, content, and as twilight deepened, the Whitmore house stood glowing against the skyline, a testament to one woman's quiet revolution, a living monument to love, compassion, and the simple act of never turning away from someone else's pain. Autumn came again, golden and calm, as if the world itself was pausing to breathe. The Whitmore Academy stood proudly at the edge of the city, its tall windows glowing in the morning light. Children rushed through the gates each day with laughter and backpacks full of hope, and though Maya had stepped back from her official role, her presence was still felt in every hallway, every classroom, every small act of kindness that rippled quietly through the lives she'd touched. Maya spent her days now between home and the garden behind the academy. The lilac bushes had grown thick and full, their scent mingling with the breeze that carried distant echoes of piano music from the students' recital hall. She often sat there with a book she never finished reading, her gaze drifting toward the horizon more than the page. Charles joined her whenever he could. "You still watch the kids play like it's the first day," he said one afternoon, handing her a cup of tea. She smiled. "They remind me why I stayed, why I kept fighting." "You didn't just fight, Maya. You changed everything." "Not everything," she said softly, "just what needed changing." He studied her face, the faint lines near her eyes. the silver in her curls, and marveled at how time had deepened her, not diminished her. "You ever regret not slowing down sooner?" he asked. "No," she said after a moment, "because if I had, maybe some of them wouldn't have found their way home." That evening, the academy hosted its annual scholarship concert. Eli, now 20, was conducting the student orchestra. The Whitmore girls sat in the front row, dressed in matching blue, their faces glowing with pride. As the lights dimmed and the first notes filled the hall, Maya felt her chest tighten not from pain, but from the sheer beauty of it. The music rose like a prayer, full of the same fragile hope she had once carried alone. Tears gathered in her eyes. She reached for Charles's hand, and he squeezed gently, wordlessly, understanding. When the final note faded, the audience rose to its feet, applause rolling like thunder. Eli turned to bow, but his eyes found Maya's first. He smiled and whispered, "For you." Afterward, backstage, the students surrounded her, offering flowers and shy hugs. "Miss Maya," one little boy said, "my mom says you built this place so we could be brave." Maya knelt to his level, her eyes soft. "Your mom is right," she said, "but bravery isn't something I gave you. It's something you've always had. You just needed someone to remind you." The boy nodded solemnly before running off. Charles watched from the doorway as she stood among the students, radiant in the soft light, her laughter mingling with theirs. Later that night, as they drove home under a blanket of stars, Maya leaned her head against the car window. "Do you ever think," she murmured, "about what comes after all this? When the lights fade, when our names stop being spoken?" Charles kept his eyes on the road, his voice quiet. "I think that when love is real, it never disappears. It just changes shape." She smiled faintly. "Like music after it ends?" "Exactly," he said. "It still lingers." Over the next few weeks, Maya's health began to waver again. She tired easily, though she tried to hide it. The girls noticed first how she'd pause on the stairs or forget to finish her tea. One night, Lila found her sitting alone in the living room. The old piano sheet opened before her. "Mom," she whispered. "You okay?" Maya smiled, though her eyes looked far away. "Just remembering." "Want me to play for you?" Lila asked. "Please," Maya said. The notes drifted softly through the quiet room, gentle and slow. When Charles came downstairs, he stood in the doorway, watching as mother and daughter shared something deeper than words. Maya's hand moved in rhythm on her lap, her breathing slow but steady. Later, as they prepared for bed, Charles noticed the framed photograph on her nightstand, the one from the academy's opening day. "You still look at that picture every night," he said. "Because it reminds me that even miracles start small," she said. He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "You're my miracle, Maya," she smiled, whispering, "Then promise me one thing, anything. When I'm gone someday, don't build statues or name halls after me. Just keep teaching people to listen." His throat tightened. "You'll still be here, Maya, always." She closed her eyes. "That's what I hope." Winter crept in again, crisp and clear. Snow covered the garden, turning the world into quiet white. The girls hung ornaments on the tree, while Maya sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, watching them with tender eyes. Eli came by on Christmas Eve with his fiancée, bringing music, laughter, and stories from the academy. The house glowed with warmth, with love. As the night wore on, the family gathered around the piano once more. "Play her song," Charles said softly. Eli nodded, and together, he and the girls began the melody, the one that had followed their family through every storm. Maya closed her eyes. The music filled the air, shimmering like light across water. When the final note faded, she opened her eyes, whispering, "Perfect." Later, as the fire burned low, she looked around the room at the family she had built, the life she had shaped, and felt an overwhelming peace. "Charles," she said quietly, "I think it's time." "Time for what?" "To rest," she said with a soft smile. "Truly rest." He took her hand, tears glistening in his eyes. "Then rest, my love. You've done more than enough." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her breathing slowing, her heart steady. The room was filled with warmth, with laughter, with love. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall again, soft, silent, endless. And in that stillness, Maya Williams, once a maid, then a healer, always a light, closed her eyes and drifted into the gentlest sleep. The piano, untouched, seemed to hum in the air, carrying her song into the night. And though she was gone, her melody lingered just as Charles had said it would, woven into the very walls of the house she had once brought back to life. The morning after the first snow, the Whitmore house stood quiet, wrapped in the stillness of winter. The world outside was white and shimmering, the kind of silence that felt sacred. Inside, a soft light filtered through the curtains of Maya's room, illuminating the chair where she had fallen asleep for the last time. Charles sat beside her, holding her hand long after her pulse had stilled. He didn't weep loudly, he just breathed in the quiet, the faint scent of lilac that still lingered around her. When the girls came in, they understood before he spoke. Lila was the first to reach her, whispering, "She looks like she's dreaming." Charles nodded, his voice breaking. "She is, sweetheart. She's finally resting." The days that followed were tender, full of visitors and memories. People came from every corner, students, teachers, mothers, fathers, even janitors, each carrying their own story of how Maya Williams had changed their life. The community center placed candles outside its entrance. The academy flew its flag at half-staff. The city mayor called her a national treasure, but to those who knew her best, she was something simpler and infinitely more precious, a reminder that kindness could be fierce. The funeral was held at the Academy Auditorium, the same hall where she had given her first speech years ago. Snow fell lightly as hundreds gathered, their breath rising like prayers. Charles stood at the podium, the medal she had once received resting beside him. His voice was calm but raw. "Maya taught me that love isn't loud. It doesn't need to be declared, it just needs to be done. She believed in people the world forgot, and she built bridges where walls once stood. If you want to honor her," he said, his voice trembling, "then listen. Listen to the quiet ones, the ones who feel unseen. That's where she'll always be." When he stepped down, Eli took the stage. He carried his violin and began to play Maya's song, the melody she had hummed, the one that had followed their family through every chapter of their lives. The sound filled the hall, fragile but radiant, as if she were still there, smiling in the back row. The audience stood in silence when it ended. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the sky glowed pale gold. Later, at home, Charles found himself wandering the rooms she had filled with life. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon. Her books lay open on the nightstand. A letter, sealed in cream-colored paper, waited on her desk. His hands shook as he unfolded it. "My dearest Charles," it began. "If you're reading this, it means my time finally came. Don't grieve for me, I've had more life, more love, than I ever dared to dream. Promise me you'll keep the music playing, that you'll let the house breathe, that you'll laugh loud enough for both of us, and when the flowers bloom again, think of me, not as gone, but as part of everything we built together. You once told me, love changes shape. You were right. I'll just be in a different one now. Always. Maya." He pressed the letter to his chest, tears sliding silently down his face. "Always," he whispered. Spring came early that year, as if the world itself wanted to keep her promise. The lilacs bloomed thicker than ever, their fragrance filling every corner of the garden. Charles spent long afternoons there with the girls, tending to the flowers Maya had planted. "She'd like this," Lila said one day, brushing dirt from her hands. "She'd say we're doing it wrong," Charles replied with a smile. "Then show us how to do it right, Dad," the twins said. So he did patiently, clumsily, laughing through tears. As months passed, the Whitmore Academy continued to grow. A new scholarship was created in Maya's name, not for the highest grades, but for the kindest heart. The school motto, engraved in bronze at the entrance, read, "Listening is the beginning of every miracle." Each year, on the anniversary of her passing, students gathered in the courtyard to plant lilacs. Eli, now head of the music department, led the orchestra through the same songs she had loved. Charles always stood quietly at the back, his hands folded, his eyes lifted toward the terrace where she had once stood watching them. One summer afternoon, Years later, he walked through the academy grounds with Lila, now grown and preparing to take over the foundation. She had Maya's calm eyes, her poise, her quiet fire. They still talk about her every day, Lila said softly. It's like she never left. She didn't, Charles said. She's in all of this. Every smile, every note, every act of courage. They stopped in front of a large painting in the main hall, a portrait of Maya surrounded by children, her hand resting on the shoulder of a little boy at the piano. The light in the painting caught her expression perfectly serene, wise, alive. You know what's funny? Lila said, tears glimmering. I used to think Mom was extraordinary because of what she did, but now I think it was because of how she made people feel. That was her gift, Charles said quietly. She made everyone believe they mattered, even me. As evening fell, he returned home to the terrace, sitting where they had shared countless cups of tea. The city spread before him, vibrant and endless. The air was warm, the lilacs swaying in the breeze. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he could almost hear her voice, soft, steady, full of light. You kept your promise, it seemed to say. You kept the music playing. He smiled. I told you I would, he murmured. Inside the house, laughter echoed from the kitchen, the girls, their families, the sound of another generation beginning to bloom. Charles leaned back, feeling the peace she had left behind, settled deep into his bones. The sky blushed with the last light of day. The piano inside began to play again. Familiar, gentle, alive. He turned his head toward the sound, whispering into the wind, You can rest now, Maya. We'll carry it from here. The song swelled, wrapping the house in memory and love. And as night fell over the Whitmore estate, the music rose softly through the open windows, drifting over the garden and into the city beyond, a melody that would never end, a legacy of a woman who once walked into a broken home and left behind a world forever changed.